Hello, and welcome to the DCIFF Film Chat Podcast. I'm Erin DeVos, and I'll be your host for this season. Join us for insightful interviews that explore the work of up-and-coming independent filmmakers from all over the world. If you're passionate about film and keen to learning about the creative process from the future cinema greats, this podcast is a must-listen for you. Our mission is to provide listeners with the engaging and informative conversations about successful and innovative films, including features, shorts, documentaries, animation, and web series from across the globe. The DCIFF Film Chat Podcast is a unique opportunity for independent filmmakers to have their voices heard in a way no other film festival can provide. You can listen to the DCIFF Film Chat Podcast on all podcast platforms or visit our website at DCIFF-indie.org/DCIFF-podcast. Thank you. Welcome, Vince, to the DCIFF Film Chat Podcast. We're thrilled to have you here and as well as chat about your film and the festival. Vince is the filmmaker for Sometimes I Imagine Your Funeral, which is a short that will be premiering at our festival under the Family Matters short fiction block, which will be happening on Sunday, February 16th. So again, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, it's our pleasure, and really excited to talk about the aspects of the film. I'm very curious about certain elements. So before we jump into chatting about it, do you mind sharing a little bit about yourself and as well as your film?
Absolutely. So I am a filmmaker originally from Central Indiana. I came up through the University of Southern California's film school. And now by day, I am a video editor and producer for a podcast studio. And then by night, evening, lunch break, anytime I get a chance, I am a writer and director working on a variety of stuff ranging from a web series. I'm currently working on a potential documentary, short films like Sometimes I Imagine a Funeral, and various other writing projects.
Ah, wow, that's so fascinating. Yeah, to be like a podcaster too. So I'll definitely have some questions related to that. But yeah, what is your film about?
Sometimes I Imagine Your Funeral is based on my relationship with my sister Lauren. My sister was struggling with addiction for the majority of her teen and young adult life. And so as I was trying to figure out how to help her, feeling like I was enabling her, feeling angry, not sure why rehab wasn't working, we tried everything to help her. And so I wrote this letter just a few weeks before she fatally overdosed in 2021 that was called Sometimes I Imagine Your Funeral. And in this letter, I basically just wrote out what it felt like to be in my position. All that anger, dread. I was mourning her before she was actually gone. And so that letter was something that I ultimately decided not to read as her eulogy because it felt like it was a little too dark and I didn't really know how to process all these emotions. And so over the years between 2021 and 2024, I did process those emotions and ultimately turned that letter I wrote into a film. So Sometimes I Imagine a Funeral is about what it feels like to have a family member who is going through addiction and ultimately to lose them. It's based on obviously my relationship with Lauren and my family members. Though the characters are fictitious, they're not named Vince. The main character's name is Max. Instead of Lauren, we have Chloe. But it's really that like true story that I went through.
Oh, wow. I'm so sorry to hear about your loss and also how transformative this story really is, like considering like your experience and also the elements of emotion that you brought in like within yourself and to, you know, share with us in the world. So we really appreciate like your story, but also I'm so sorry that that happened to you too, and that this was an outlet to be able to share and showcase with everyone.
Yeah, it's been really rewarding emotionally because for me, especially going through this when I was actively going through my sister's addiction, I wouldn't really tell anybody what was going on. I would be hanging out with friends, out, in class, at work, wherever. I would get one of those calls where there's an emergency, you have to drop everything and try to help whatever that situation is. And then I would deal with that, and then I would walk back into the classroom or into the house with my friends, and I would act like nothing was happening. And so to be able to even just announcing the film, I did a long crowdfunding project early last year in 2024, and then making the film and now showing it. It's been so rewarding because I'm finally able to express those emotions and that side of me that for a long time I kind of just kept closed. And I think as filmmakers, that is like one of the benefits of this expression is that we're able to tell stories that maybe we wouldn't have said if we didn't have that outlet of filmmaking.
Right. Yeah, no, so true, and in ways, like, it's therapeutic because 'cause you're letting everything out, like, from, like, the physical component, but also, like, the mental and emotional sense of it all, so, no,
It
it's
really is.
truly yeah, truly a story, and it makes me feel, like, about, like, my personal, like, experience, like, in the sense that, like, some friends, like, who've either gone, like, through, like, addiction or, even suicide, I felt like your film was so powerful for those, like, similar to, like, the situation that you were in, but, like, for those who are in a similar position to be able to try to figure out and understand how to interpret those feelings and, be able to ultimately help the person too.
Yeah, I look at the film weirdly, the metaphor I came up with, which is terrible, is that it's almost like a strainer, where the first half of the film is like where you're just pouring all those ingredients in. Those are like the raw emotions of what you're feeling when you have someone in your life who you've lost, all of the memories that you think led to that bad thing happening. And what you don't realize is that, like with the strainer metaphor, is that when you come out the other side of that, what you're left with that I guess that strains through is those, like, positive memories
Mhm.
and what you're ultimately going to remember that person by. Whether that's a friend, a loved one, a family member, I do think it's really applicable to any type of loss.
Yeah, absolutely, and that kind of reminds me to ask too, like, how did you approach, like, balancing all those emotions, like, as this is a, like, personal experience for you and be able to, and portray that into the film.
Yeah, that was a really tough thing for me because initially when I first started working on the project, I tried to make the film in 2023, and I just wasn't ready. I realized that working with people like, the few, like, reach outs I did or, like, communications I did, I realized that I wasn't able to separate myself professionally and personally in that time, and so by the time we did make the film, I felt like I got to a place where I was kind of able to compartmentalize and in this moment, I'm a human. In this moment, I'm putting on my director's hat. I'm looking at this as a technician. Okay, what does the scene need on an objective level, like for this piece of art? But there were moments where, I was recreating some of the worst moments of my life. We shot a scene where Chloe, the sister character, had just overdosed non-fatally, and the fire department came and in the scene she gets carried off in a stretcher into an ambulance
Mhm,
and we're filming this in my hometown at my childhood best friend's house. We have the actual fire department from my hometown coming and, carrying off the actress in a stretcher, and that's a one-to-one
mhm,
rip of, like, my life, a moment in time, and so I was standing there on the porch with the red lights flashing and just realized how almost messed up it was that I was bringing in this entire cast and crew into this horrible memory that I was recreating.
right.
And another moment was when we were at the church where the funeral scenes take place. That's the actual church where my sister's funeral was. 8 years before that, that's where my mom's funeral was. And that church is actually weirdly where their ashes are. And so to me, everything we're doing has that extra weight to it, whereas the cast and crew doesn't necessarily know just how real this is. And so I did actually find though that instead of pretending that we were just making this film and it was totally separate, by opening up myself and being vulnerable with the cast and crew, even someone who's not going to be acting on screen, like, the a production assistant, just opening up to them about what is going on with me and like how I got to this place helped them one be invested in the story and be invested in the production to make it as good as they could. And then two, I got a lot of that vulnerability back. And I realized just like I knew how widespread addiction was or how widespread any sort of loss like suicide was, but I realized just in even in our 20, 30 person crew, how many people had similar stories.
Mm.
That was really amazing.
Yeah. No, to be able to, bond over a traumatic experience is very healing. And so I'm glad that you were able to have such a supportive crew and for you to also be able to open up about the subject too and knowing how personal it was. And we're, I guess, through like that process and knowing, cast and crew have also had their experiences, like, was there an element of kind of like meeting with like I mean, this may be personal, but kind of like meeting with like a therapist or kind of like having kind of like session like kind of all together to be able to kind of talk about your experiences, if that makes sense or appropriate to ask?
Yeah, no, that is a really interesting question, and through the lens of making this film, I did a lot. Well, there's a couple things on my mind, but I did a lot of, like, one-on-one talks with the main actor, Josiah, who is so good in the film, and also some of the other cast and crew that, like, just talking about my experiences, like, I showed Josiah the original letter that I wrote to Lauren back in 2021. We
Mhm.
talked through just all of the emotions that I had, and we found ways that we could make the character of Max distinct and have his own history and his own backstory so we could kind of combine our own two visions. But ultimately, I think the really like cathartic experience was our premiere. Instead, like with the regular film, my first thought for premieres would be, okay, let's rent out a theater, let's get everyone, cast and crew, local, like anyone we can there, and just celebrate, or we'll submit to festivals and we'll do our premieres, at a place like DCIFF, which is like generally like that's my go-to is okay, let's get this into festivals.
Mhm.
But with a film like this, I realized that this is completely different than any other project I've done before, and that it has a really real world application that it could be used for, which
Mhm.
is those emotional, vulnerable conversations about what it's like to lose someone, what it's like to have an overdose happen to you or to a loved one. And so I partnered with Community Fairbanks Recovery Center, which is Indiana's largest rehabilitation facility. And we did a really big screening at Butler University where we paired Sometimes I Imagine a Funeral with that like educational panel discussion. We had a expert on public health. We had someone who works with Overdose Lifeline, which is a big nonprofit in the addiction space. And we had a couple of representatives from Community Fairbanks Recovery Center that were family counselors. And so we kind of almost live processed the emotions of the film, talked about some of the science of addiction, what is the impact on the family, what are some of the kind of recipe ingredients for someone to go down the path of addiction. And we've done multiple different screenings like that with different organizations, different nonprofits that have honestly really helped me to understand the things that I put into the film. I didn't even know that these were the early warning signs of someone going through addiction. And these are just some things that I subconsciously put in because they felt true to me. And now I'm learning how to process those
Mhm.
after the fact, which is really cool.
Yeah. No, that's really awesome, like, to have been able to partner with an organization and also to be able to open up that dialogue. Because I feel, with very, like, sensitive, like, films, like, I always think, like, the most recent one that I'm thinking of is kinda like It Ends With Us. I know it's, like, completely different type of subjects, but, in the sense that, like and there's a lot more drama with that in the sense, but in the sense of just being able to, like, support one another too through this, like, I feel, mental health has been at the forefront, in more recent years, and so to be able to take care of, like, who's working with you and, importantly, like, how you're feeling too, as personal as this story is. So I really appreciate you, like, opening up and sharing those details because it's not often we get to talk about this, like, in the film world and also, like, the type of support that we can provide on set to our cast and crew. So
Yeah, it's not often that you work on a project where you know that there are going to be some tears pretty much guaranteed
Mhm.
at a specific moment, or you walk into a film like It Ends With Us, where you know that things are going to be triggering for certain audience members, and they're going to see experiences that they had reflected on the screen.
Mhm.
And so, knowing or at least trying to approach that as responsibly as you can is really important, and just make sure that there's an outlet for or an avenue that people can like share those feelings is really important.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that kind of brings into one of another question I had for you, which was like, what was something that you had learned as a director while making this film?
This was the film with the biggest budget that I've ever worked with, and one of the things I realized just is I already knew film was expensive, but realizing this was a 3-day shoot, we filmed in my hometown in Indiana, which I'd never done before since I lived in Los Angeles.
Hmm.
We flew in certain crew because we liked working with them in LA, and we wanted to work with them in Indiana. And I know, like, every film is a kind of a Herculean effort of sheer willpower,
Hmm.
and I just realized that again and again on this project that the only way we can make this with this budget is if we call in as many favors as we can. If we It's all about, like, those relationships, like, for instance, it took me about 3 or 4 months to get the fire department from my hometown to agree to be part of the project, and it was just realizing how much elbow grease goes into making a film was something I learned. And yeah, and I also learned the importance, like, you hear it all the time, find a story that is unique to you, that only you could tell and put into a film or any project.
Hmm.
And a lot of my scripts are comedy based, which I really enjoy working in that genre, but I never made something quite this personal, where it was showing multiple of the most traumatizing moments or most stressful memories, or even moments of joy that also the film has. I'd never done something like that,
Hmm.
and it wasn't until I was working on the script that I realized, wait, this might be the story that is, like, the most personal to me.
Hmm.
And so it was really cool for me to see what it can be like and what the project can turn out like when you are telling that story that's genuinely authentically yours.
Relating to like talking about like directing like around sensitive subjects, like what type of advice would you give to filmmakers who are, tackling difficult emotional topics?
That's a really good question. I would say that if you are making a film where you're tackling a really difficult subject, even if it's okay if you don't have personal experience with that topic. You don't have to, like, to make sometimes I imagine a funeral, I don't think that you necessarily need to have lost a loved one to an overdose. But as long as you are approaching the topic and trying to learn as much as you can about it, if you for instance, if I were trying to make this film about addiction and I had no experience with it, what I would recommend is to try to do as many interviews as you can with people who have gone through this. Ask them, if you were making a film like this, what are the essential beats? What are moments that you think that I've, as someone who's not gone through this, like, what would I miss? And so just try to be as authentic as you possibly can, I think is really important. I remember when I was 22, I made a film about what it's like to be a 35-year-old married, unemployed person in Los Angeles. And I was a junior in college. I had never had a real job outside of, working at an ice cream shop. I had never been married. I did not really know what depression felt like. And we were trying to make this film, and I realize now how silly that is. And if I were making now, having lost my job at one point, I know what it's like to lose your job and to kind of feel that purpose, a little bit of your purpose slipping away. I would make that film entirely differently. So it's just kind of trying to make things, you know, as authentically as you can is always really important.
Hmm. Absolutely. That's such a good point. And yeah, that kind of makes you think like on other subjects in the sense that I see, films all the time, like whether it's like, the actor, like, we know they're older, but they're portraying like a younger role. But, in reverse, like with the director role too, like in the sense of like just the life experience you have at that point and trying to portray something older. So no, but I thought like your
Yeah,
advice was really spot on. But go for it.
no, no, it's like it's totally okay to make films that's not about your own experience. I think that if we only made films about what it's like to be us, there wouldn't be a lot of stories or as many stories.
Right.
There's always a story that's like perfect to be told by someone who has had that experience or is the person that they're making the film about. But yeah, we can always make imaginary things into stories. That's totally okay. Just try to do it as well as you can.
Definitely. Agreed. And yeah, so what is next for you as a director?
That is a great question. With Sometimes I Imagine Your Funeral, there's a couple of things that I would love to do with it because we've made some educational material, like curriculum that goes along with the film. So classrooms can show the film, talk about it with their students. We have a discussion guide, educational points. And so this isn't something I would expect to say, but one of the things I'm really hoping to do with that project, in addition to, getting the film as far as we can with festivals, is get that film into classrooms across the country. I would also love to make I've kind of outlined an educational series of additional scenes that, a classroom could show, every single week during their unit on drugs. They could show one scene every single week that is new, and that would culminate in watching the short film. And along the way, they would hear from me and, hey, this is based on my actual lived experience. By the end, I hope you understand what it's like to go through this. So I'm really hoping to get a lot of our casting crew back together, film that educational series, get that into classrooms. At some point, I would love to develop this script into a feature.
Wow.
I think that I keep writing down ideas of little moments I remember from growing up, and it's really just all about that sibling dynamic. And then on the nonfiction side, I'm working on a documentary right now that is about outdoor behavioral therapy. So that includes wilderness therapy, a couple of other different like modes, which is something I did not expect to work on, but it's a really interesting field. Obviously a lot of like controversy associated with that, but also a lot of like positive outcomes. So potentially that's an if funding happens, but hoping to get to work on that documentary as well. And then in between all of that, different, small projects. Sketch comedy is something I really enjoy doing. So I'm working on something like that will hopefully release around Christmas. And also I'm getting married. So directing and producing a wedding.
Wow, that's so amazing. Like all the different projects. Well, congratulations on, getting married and all the continuations of it. And like, I love the educational piece that you're bringing to your film too. And it makes me so glad I asked the questions I did earlier because like having that type of support. And I was just even thinking as I was watching your film, I could really see this in kind of like, like a guidance counselor type of you know, setting in that way of like kind of like really making it more of like a teaching moment and kind of how to help, you know, help with those emotions, like filtrate it. So no,
Yeah, anytime I've shown it to any teachers, like health teachers specifically, their first response is, "This is such a powerful tool. I would love to use this with my students." And I think that they have to have a really responsibly guided, moderated discussion about it
right.
because you can't just show this to a group of students and then have, all right, the bell rings, bye. They need to be able to process this in a like safe space where they can talk about anything that they want. So yeah, in about a month, I'll be back in Indiana, and I'm actually going to get to go to a classroom and see that happen live, which will be really.
Wow. Yeah, I was to say if there's any way that DCIFF and, everyone listening to be able to support you and spread the word about the educational pieces that you are, well, yeah, the educational opportunities that you're bringing with your film, we would definitely love to pass that along and share it because I know we've been in contact with like a few different organizations like for other films that relate to mental health, but to be able to like plug your film into that conversation, I think, or well, mental health and addiction, but to be able to plug that in would be really, insightful to us, but to help you spread the word too. So that's really
Yeah,
cool.
I would absolutely love that. And for anyone listening, our website is www.siiyf-film.com. There is a contact sheet on there where you can reach out if you'd like to set up a screening. Right now, we're not trying to make any money off of this. Getting into classrooms is just a dream of mine. I think, like, it would really, really warm my heart if in 10 years a classroom is still showing this film and still getting mileage out of it, because I think that it is timeless. So, I would really love to see that. And something kind of funny is that, well, before we were filming, one of the actors came up to me and said, "Hey, you might wanna consider, like, there's a couple of, like, F words in here, some swearing. You might wanna consider filming versions of those scenes without swearing, just in case you want to have, like, a clean version down the line." And I said, "Yeah, that's a great idea." Well, fast forward to now, we're trying to get this into classrooms. Anyone I tell, "Hey, by the way, there's a clean language version," they immediately say, "Yes, yes, that's the one we want. We want the clean version. These are 15-year-olds. We wanna show them something that doesn't have the F word in it." So that was a really, really cool, unexpected thing, and a lot of good has come out of it.
Oh yeah, definitely. And that's a good tip too, to always make sure you have a clean version and
You never know.
yeah, no, you never know. So that was great advice too. Oh, well, Vince, it's been so awesome having you here today. Is there anything that I may not have asked or we didn't discuss that you wanted to share on the podcast?
I would love to shout out the amazing cast and crew that worked on the project. It was a crew of a lot of Indiana-based crew members, some of my childhood best friends, a lot of my best friends from Los Angeles, crew members that I either met or have worked with multiple times. The actors were just incredible. There's in the film, there's three different ages of the characters. So you have child Max, teen Max, and adult Max, and same with Chloe. And these actors came from all over the Midwest. One of them came from New York, and they just did such a wonderful job. So I just want to shout out everyone who conspired to make this film so good. People watch the film and they say, I thought that was, the adult and the teen were the same person. So that's just a tremendous effort of, our casting, our actors, our hair, makeup, and costume. And everyone just did such a good job. So excited to get to celebrate them at DCIFF 2025.
Yes. Well, we're looking forward to it and meeting you in person and anyone else that's coming out to join us. So again, Vince's film, Sometimes I Imagine Your Funeral, will be screening on Sunday, February 16th, a part of the film festival this year. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
This podcast is brought to you by the DCIFF supporters. We could not be here without all of you to be sharing this amazing outlet with filmmakers from around the world. If you are interested in supporting DCIFF, head on over to our website through the link description in the bio of this episode, or you can go right to the website, which is DCIFF-indie.org. to connect with us and learn more about our Future of Film programs, our festival, and also more educational opportunities in what we do with our high school students, community, and beyond. We look forward to your support.